My Lords, in the run-up to this year's budget statement, my message to the Chancellor was to be bold and take action on universal credit. It was an opportunity to take a transformational step forward in restoring a robust approach to tackling levels of poverty faced by too many. Universal credit is a reform that began with universal cross-party support and which, through multiple decisions, had its potential eroded. This was the moment to correct this, and the Chancellor is to be congratulated for taking that opportunity. As we in this House know, universal credit was designed to make work pay and tackle poverty in a way that supports those who cannot work and rewards the move into work and progression in work. We all agreed that it was a better way forwards, correcting many of the complexities, clawbacks and cliff edges of the benefit and tax credit system that it replaced. The Social Metrics Commission's new poverty measure, and I refer to my entry in the Members' Register of Interest, made clear the size of the poverty challenge facing policymakers today, and would, I hope, have focused the Chancellor's mind at the time of the budget. It shows that 14.2 million people in the UK experience poverty at any one point in time, and about 8.5 million working-age adults, 4.5 million children and 1.5 million pensioners. Of these, nearly 3 million people live in families where all adults work full-time, yet are still in poverty. These families are doing everything we could ask of them, and yet they are still struggling. But part of the bigger picture for the Chancellor as he made his budget decisions is that Britain is also experiencing record high levels of employment. So as people are transitioning from no work to part-time work to full-time work, they are themselves on a pathway out of poverty. This is by far the best way for a family to work themselves out of poverty. But as the Social Metrics Commission demonstrates, for that pathway to be effective, it really needs to be full-time work. And yet even then, about 8% of families who work full-time are still in poverty. This is a structural issue that needs to be corrected, and it reveals the fragility of many of the lives of those on low incomes and the entrenched nature of poverty for some. The situation is even more fragile than many realise. Close to 1 million people are living in families where someone works, but they are only just above the poverty line. There are another 1 million people living in families where someone works who are less than 5% below the poverty line. This is why small work allowances changes can be the difference between supporting many of these families out of poverty and tipping many of them below the poverty line. Therefore, although it has taken until 2018 to go even part way to restoring the investment in universal credit, I hugely welcome the Chancellor's announcement of restoring £1.7 billion to the universal credit work allowances and investing £1 billion in smoothing the transition. This will help ensure that the situation of in-work poverty is stabilised, at least for families with children. This investment by the Chancellor is hugely welcome, as it stops a cut that this House was responsible for resisting in tax credits from being applied to universal credit. And for one moment, I would like to pause and just pay tribute to Baroness Hollis for her work in preventing this cut from impacting on the lives of tax credit claimants. And I know that if she had been here on Budget Day, she would have been relieved to hear the news about the reinvestment in universal credit, but would also have reminded us, in that way that she always does, or did, that it does not take us forward, it prevents us from going backwards. So what would it take to take us forward? Of course, the long-term ambition is to tackle poverty by helping families to a position where they're earning well above the poverty threshold. In this respect, there are a number of factors that are important in their potential impact on poverty. The government could improve support for childcare and universal credit from 85% of costs for 2 children only to all costs for multiple children. This would be one way of ensuring that it always pays to work for those on low incomes. The government could also take steps towards tackling future debt problems, and any action to continue to further reduce the number of waiting days in universal credit would have the impact of reducing debt levels. And by ensuring that historic debt is not brought across from HMRC onto UC claimants, we need to consider taking action on tax credit legacy debt to ensure that the move to universal credit does not leave people trapped in historic tax credit debt. These are some of the next challenges for the Chancellor to address in future fiscal events, along with much discussed issues such as ending the uprating freeze. All of these recommendations would ensure that the system rewards work and supports families when they need it most, and when they are doing everything they can to change their family's trajectory. By reinvesting in the work allowances, though, the Chancellor has taken a big step forwards towards a comprehensive approach to tackling poverty and signalled his intent to protect living standards for those who are doing all they can to make ends meet, but who are still struggling. If the government is going to ease austerity, this was the most impactful place to do so first. But we all know that as much heavy lifting as government can do and does, it can't do it all by itself. People want to know that when they go to work, that it is their hard work that is supporting their family. They want to know that if they do everything right, if they take a job and work full-time, they will not be in poverty. There have been so many debates on what constitutes an appropriate entry or basic level wage. Some argue that if you raise wages, you will create unemployment. I can even remember being part of a team at Number 10 where we were concerned about whether raising the minimum wage by just 50p would cause job losses. This has not happened. Others argue that the market will set wages fairly. However, this simply isn't the case when you factor in the impact of the welfare state on what should be a basic wage. Employers have no clear idea of what the real market wage is for employees who are also in receipt of tax credits, because their wages have been subsidised by the government for so long. The only way to fix this problem for good is for employers to be reconnected with their employees who work for them, not in some sort of gimmicky way, but by employers asking the very real question, can my staff actually live on the wage I am paying them? There is a solid business case for employers taking this seriously. Research has shown that companies that have moved their lowest paid onto a living wage salary reduce staff turnover and absenteeism and achieve greater productivity. However, this is also about businesses simply doing the right thing, investing in their people, and ensuring that nobody who goes out and works full-time lives in poverty. I welcome, therefore, the government's commitment to raising the national living wage to 60% of median earnings by 2020, and to hearing from the Low Pay Commission how they plan to exercise their ultimate remit of ending low pay. Government is responsible for thinking through the economic systems and structures that would see all people flourish. But all companies can restore that very natural human connection between employers and employees by taking a hard look at wherever they could step up and make a real contribution to the lived experience of their workforce. Tackling poverty in this country will not be done by the government alone. It will take all of us. But credit where credit is due to the Chancellor for taking a big step forward to avoid any step backwards.
My